With Arthur.
Yeah.
Your Arthur.
That'd be good.
Yeah,
Have you been to Think Box before?
This is the first time.
Awesome, welcome.
Yep.
Well,
Obviously, by my tardiness, it took me a few times.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I'm not turning in the RTA lot. My nav said, yes, you are. I'm like,
Right.
yeah, once I did, this is fine. I'm looking forward to it.
Awesome, very well, thanks for coming. Well, in 1 second, maybe we'll just do quick intros as we're gonna stream on Zoom and on LinkedIn in a second, but we'll
Okay.
do, probably if you want to start and introduce yourself.
Hello, everyone. My name is Carlton Cherry. I'm here with the Post-Bac Research Education Program through the National Institute of Health. I'm doing research on the Cleveland African American Prostate Cancer Project, where we're going into barbershops and trying to make healthcare as accessible as possible.
Is it Carlton?
Carlton Cherry.
Hi everyone, I'm Evelyn Udonchuk. I'm a second year biomedical engineering student involved with a bunch of entrepreneurship related things here. And I'm really excited for this talk.
hi, Mindy Veale. I'm with the Veale Institute. I think we had a chance to talk earlier about the EIR program. I work with faculty and alumni.
Bob Sopko, case launch night, help students and alumni with their business ideas. I'm also on EIR at Jumpstart and YVI, and pretty close with Mike Conley. And you guys let us use the trophy at CES. It was awesome. We had it for 2 hours one afternoon. Love the Cavs, and there's an event March 6th coming up with data analytics.
Okay.
You have 200 people signed up to it. And we're going to be taking a couple students out to help you.
Yeah, Mike can actually speak in for tonight's game with a lot of tech people from the community.
Oh, is he?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, yeah, March 6th is a similar data analytics. They're going to be going over it. So
Nick Barron from the Institute for Smart Secure and Connected Systems. I get to participate in the Leadership Cleveland program class with Kevin this year, the Office of Research. So it's driving research across campus in the community.
Come here.
I'm
Knowing what you know.
LC bonding.
Right.
I'm Lauren Middlecombe. I'm the Assistant Dean for Strategic Initiatives at the Key School of Engineering. And I wear a lot of hats, and it covers diversity, improving our research and academic enterprises, meeting needs of faculty, staff, and students.
Great, good to meet you.
I'm Megan Kuhar. I'm the marketing lead here for the Veale Institute. Also have some coaching background and just really excited to be here.
Great, and I'll kick it off and introduce myself. Michael Goldberg. I'm our executive director of the Veale Institute for Entrepreneurship and also a faculty member at Weatherhead. I want to welcome you today to the to our speaker series. For those that are watching on LinkedIn and Zoom, it's wonderful to have you guys here. You can ask your questions on the Zoom chat. Megan will be monitoring, or on LinkedIn, just put a question in the chat. Also, thank you for being part of our inaugural Executive in Residence program, which is a partnership with Weatherhead. So it's really fun to engage with leaders in our community, bringing folks to campus. Obviously, having you here at ThinkBox today is wonderful. And obviously, we appreciate our partnership with, I'm a lifelong Cleveland sports fan and got to go to Donovan's 71-point game. My son was like leaving the country. I was like, let's go to that game. So that was fun. So it's great to have you. All of our sessions in our speaker series are moderated by students, and we don't play favorites, but Trey Armstrong is one of our favorites. Trey is graduated from undergrad, is in our medical physiology program. He's gotten a few acceptances from medical school already for next year. Was a collegiate baseball player and is coaching this year. And I've gotten to know him as a student and as a fellow broadcaster. We were broadcasting a NCAA softball game. So we'll miss Trey, at least from Harvard campus a little bit. He stays for medical school. And I'll pass it over to Trey, who will moderate today's discussion. And as I mentioned, please jump in with additional questions. So Trey, over to you.
Awesome. So thank you everyone for being here. Kevin, thank you for being here as well. Just as we get going, if you don't mind just sharing a little bit about your background, and what you do and what your profession is.
Sure. Kevin Clayton, and I'm the Senior VP for Social Impact and Equity for the Cleveland Cavaliers organization. And I say it like that because when most people hear me say the Cavs, they think of just the Cavs. but we have actually multiple properties underneath us. It's everything that happens at Rocky Mortgage Fieldhouse, which could include on any given year over 200 ticketed events and another 1,500 private events. Then we have a hockey team, the Monsters. We have an esports team, which is the Cleveland Legion, as well as, you know, the Cavs and the Cleveland Charge, which we brought up from Canton, and they play over at Cleveland State. So from a background standpoint, I'm a native Clevelander. Grew up in Cleveland on the east side, moved into Shaker Heights, kind of in the 5th or 6th grade, played high school sports here, played basketball, was pretty decent, enough to get me to a D1 school and play collegiately to get education. Went to North Carolina Central, which is a historically Black college in Durham, North Carolina. And then I transferred actually to Wilmington College down in Cincinnati. And back then it was the Cincinnati Bengals training camp. Started my career in sales and marketing, which actually kind of surprises some because of the long work that I had in this space of diversity and inclusion. But it was a decade of time in which I spent with P&G and had a really good career. That's actually when I learned really the basic foundation of what diversity is and what it is not. Keep in mind, I go back to a period of time on the heels of affirmative action and multiculturalism when there was the only D in the DEI, BJ, whatever it's called now. And that was really just kind of black and white, male, female. And then it's evolved over a period of time. Over a period of time, I've had a chance to work in a number of places, and I'll qualify this by saying I can keep a job. But I left P&G I started when I was 21, had a 10-year career, and it was like, you know, I really want to be an entrepreneur. And that's what was inside of me. And it's like, I got 10 years with the world's greatest company. I can always go back. So I opened up my own consulting firm. I've been in food service, owned a restaurant, jazz club, affordable housing companies. I kind of dabbled in a lot of different things. As an entrepreneur, particularly in the early stages, if someone says, can you do this? It doesn't matter if you can or cannot. Yeah, I can do it because I can find somebody to help me. So there were a number of times in which I got into other fields of work because of just saying yes before no, which is one of our mantras with the Cavs, and then finding other people to partner with. So with that, I had my consulting firm. One of my clients was Russell Corporation, based out of Alexander City, Alabama. They had moved to Atlanta, and Russell Corporation makes Spalding, jerseys, Brooks running shoes, Russell athletic gear. This was prior to Nike and Under Armour being kind of the uniform company. For those of you who are over 30 years old in this room or on camera, you probably wore a Russell t-shirt, sweatshirt, uniform, or what have you. And the CEO asked me at that time, Kevin, I like what you're doing. We want to formalize this work of diversity. And we want to create a kind of global position. So you'd be our global executive for diversity, and you get to keep your consulting company. So based on how you all responded, so here's what, it took you about a half a second to respond like that, right? It took me about 3 seconds because I asked him to repeat it just to make sure. Right, so you want me to come on, open up your practice of diversity, and I can keep my consulting company? And he said, yes. So I moved to Atlanta and was able to do that. And then after 4 or 5 years, Russell got bought out by Berkshire Hathaway. They divested everything. And basically at that point, I'm like, no, I'm going to go and continue to do my own thing. American Cancer Society, which is in Atlanta, Georgia, they came to me, there was a position to kind of start their DE&I work. So then I got into what I'll say healthcare by helping to lead that work. I then worked for the United States Tennis Association in New York. From the USTA, I then went back to Atlanta because I wanted to take everything I had learned to really help historically Black colleges to brand themselves in a very unique way. Okay, I'm talking about 2018 and today, 2012. And today we're now discovering that they're historically Black colleges. And obviously I'm saying that facetiously because we have been around for hundreds of years. And yet now there's this uprising, which is great. Fast forward, I then actually got back into healthcare. Bon Secours Mercy Health out of Cincinnati had asked me to come and be their leader around DE&I. So now there was the E, there was the I. Then my favorite team growing up posted a position. And as much as I would like to tell all of you, I was one of a million people that they sought after. I was this highly accredited, this very accomplished person. No, here's the truth. My youngest daughter, who is in Atlanta, she said, Dad, the Cavs just posted something on LinkedIn. And I'm like, okay, what's that do for me? She's like, Dad, you should just sign up for it. Fast forward, I said, no, I'm great. We just, Mercy Health, they just merged with Bon Secours. We were the 5th largest healthcare system in the country, over 11 states, 2,500 touch points of service. And I'm actually doing the work that is helping to save lives. And I said, Casey, that's great. 5-6 months later, she said, Dad, the Cavs posted this position again. It turned out it was a day that my boss actually, I won't say the word, frustrated me. And I said, oh, what the heck, Casey, go ahead and send it in. Literally, that's how I got here. And she sent it in, talked with the Cavs, and they had this vision of how they wanted to kind of go about this work. And I'm now in my 4th season, which we came on the heels of 2019, the year before LeBron had left. And then there was the pandemic that hit. So last year was really my first full year. And then we have this year. So that's kind of my life story and how I got here. It was because it was a frustrating day for all of you. I mean, you all had them, right? When maybe your boss said something, you didn't feel a certain way. This one was such that it played out in a way that I would just never do it any differently.
That's amazing. That's amazing. So, I mean, you took us to various backgrounds there, a lot of different passion that I heard in what you discussed. So what is one aspect of your job currently, or just in your area or your field, that you're most passionate about right now?
So I'm most passionate about being able to leverage the platform of professional sports to drive social change in our community. In a community that is, as many of you may or may not know, is the worst rated city as far as poverty, worst rated city for child poverty, maternal issues, paternal issues with Black women relative to all the things that Black communities kind of go through from a crime standpoint, gun violence. So all of the social determinants of health are folk that are driving communities to action. We have a chance through sports to make a difference. And that's what I'm really most proud of. My position was elevated, and my CEO and I will come up with what is the title. I purposely chose the title of social impact and equity because those are outcomes of the work of DE&I. Those are outcomes of community engagement. Those are outcomes of social responsibility. And I wanted to be more focused on the outcomes because even the concept of diversity, inclusion, and equity are now being challenged in ways that it's being put under ESG, which is environmental, social, and governance. It's being put back in just the HR component, which really focuses on the representation of people around the table. It really doesn't make systemic change. So that's what I'm most proud of, that I have an amazing platform and have been able to connect that platform with the Browns and the Guardians, and we have formed an alliance that I have the opportunity to lead as well, to deal with issues around the connecting points between Black and Brown communities and law enforcement, education, and civic engagement.
That's amazing. That's amazing. So as a student who's been in Cleveland now for 6 years and someone who takes a lot of pride in being involved in the community, how could I engage in the community along with the Cavs or partner? What are some of the projects that you have out there for people who are interested in doing more in the community?
Yep, so I'm going to give you two different entities for that pathway.
Okay.
So I'll start with the Cavs, which what you asked me for. And we do a lot of things in the community. We partner with nonprofit organizations. We have volunteer programs where we will partner with nonprofits, not only to support them, but also to bring their particular constituents with us. We have shadowing opportunities for students. If you want to come spend a day with me and our team, we can do those sorts of things. We also have opportunities where when we're out in the community, where I'm more than happy to let people know where we're going to be and what we're going to do. If it's a speaking engagement, if it's a seminar, any of those things, I'm happy to do. The other hat that I wear, and this is a relatively new hat, is I'm now the chair of the Cleveland Urban League. And as chair, one of our strategies is to actually elevate young people to be a part of the Urban League's movement, which is around economic empowerment for our community. It's about education. So being able to partner there, and the Cavs are a big sponsor and partner with Urban League. So it's the best of both worlds that you get.
Awesome, awesome. Now, I'm gonna redirect and go to your history and your past a little bit. So you attended an HBCU as an athlete. And I know there's been more of this, like you said, around 2018, there was like, oh, there's HBCUs or historically Black colleges and universities. So what efforts do you think are needed to give these historically Black colleges and universities the same resources and access as some of the predominantly white institutions?
So with that, even when I was a student athlete at North Carolina Central, the resources that we had were not very good. And I compared that to other schools in which it recruited me. And if it wasn't for the fact that my uncle, who went to North Carolina Central, his name is Sam Jones, he's a Hall of Fame basketball player with the Boston Celtics, I would have probably gone to another school just based on the resources. And it doesn't really make sense that these are state schools, they don't have the same resources, but they're identified based on the biases that I believe that these different states have around these schools are less than. They're not less than. They play a significant role in our country's education system, our country's cultural system. So having partnerships, and I can only talk about one I'll talk about one that I'm really familiar with. So when I lived in Atlanta, Georgia Tech and Morehouse had a strategic partnership. They had dual degrees. So you still had the experience of going to this prestigious school of HBCU, Morehouse, but then you also had kind of Georgia Tech to partner with. And they had they had dual curriculums. Students from Georgia Tech would go to Morehouse and vice versa. So having our larger schools that are in the same proximity of the HBCUs partner with them, I think is a way to help, because it also begins to lift the stigma that these schools are less than.
I love that. Okay, so redirecting again. You had a plethora of experiences in the field and with DEI. Which role did you learn the most from? And then what did you learn from that role?
And I'm so appreciative that you didn't say I had a whole bunch of jobs. A plethora of experience. Okay, I appreciate that. Can I talk about two?
Yeah, for sure.
All right, so I talked about my experience with P&G. That to me, from a D&I perspective, so understand that I was a sales manager. I was an executive that led sales and developed sales promotions and marketing and all of those sorts of things. I'll share a story with you that happened to me in my career. Now I'm going back to kind of the late 80s, and John Pepper, who was a renowned CEO of P&G, he called a worldwide meeting together to talk about the fact that our business was under attack from companies from Asia. It was Chinese companies, Taiwanese companies, Japanese companies. Some of you may remember they were buying up a number of US companies, as well as the automotive industry was under attack because from a quality standpoint, they had left Detroit in the dust. So we were thinking about our business, and there was a Chinese company who bought Chiquita Banana, and it was right across the street from our world headquarters in Cincinnati. And we were like, no, not in our house. And this worldwide meeting that John called was to talk about what we're going to do differently. So we talked about total quality, we talked about category management, and we talked about diversity. I walked over to this session with one of my colleagues, his name is Mike, and he and I had worked together for a couple of years. I was on assignment in Cincinnati. We walk over to this meeting, and we're both excited. It was kind of our first worldwide meeting. And John Pepper then talks about these three categories. When he gets to diversity, it just hit me in a very different way, because what he talked about was we are going to now make sure that we have the best and brightest talent in the world that comes to work for us. And we haven't done that when we looked at the demographics of our workforce and compared it to our talent pool. What I saw was more people like me are gonna have a chance, that look like me, are gonna have a chance to come work for P&G. We're gonna expand our marketing, we're gonna do a lot of things. So I left out of that meeting excited. Literally from that 5 blocks, I don't think my feet hit the ground because I was like, wow, this is amazing. My friend Mike, my colleague, wasn't so excited. He wasn't excited at all. So I asked him, I said, man, what do you think? He was like, well, the category management stuff is great, the total quality stuff is great, but that diversity piece, I'm not really feeling it. My bias at that point was, here's a white male, I've been working with this guy for a couple of years, he's prejudiced or racist or sexist. That was my bias. But I didn't adhere to that bias. What I did was I asked him the question, because if I made that assumption, it would have created my opinion of him based on what he was sharing with me without understanding where that was coming from. So here's what Mike told me. He said, Kevin, I don't even understand what John just talked about, because if this is diversity for the sake of diversity, which means we had 14 seats around the table. If we have 1 of those, 2 of those, 4 of those, 3 of those, I don't see how that's going to help me. But if this is diversity around how we're going to have these 14 seats, we have 1 of those, 2 of those, 3 of those, and collectively that's going to help me sell more Charmin, more Folgers, more Tide, more White Cloud, more Pampers, I'm all in. The light bulb went off. That everyone can't do this work based on it being some emotional tie in this passion, because it's not sustainable. And particularly if you're in business, even if it's a nonprofit, if it's not tied to mission, if it's not tied to the bottom line, which is why people join organizations, then it's not sustainable. So the lesson that I learned, and the reason why this was so important, is that Mike is a white male. And again, back then, white males were dominant throughout organizations. Even today, it's more white males at the top of the house for most organizations. If they don't see themselves and how this work benefits them, then they might give the green light to move forward. But what's not going to happen is you won't have them emotionally tied, because it's not in their best interest. They can't see how it connects. So everything that I have done around this work, I've always built the business case around. I've always looked at whatever the objective was for an organization and built the ties to that work, because that's why all of us come to either work or we join organizations for the mission or what the objectives are. So my whole thing in the industry, which people now know me by, it's like, okay, what's the business case? What's the business motive? What's the business rationale or organizational rationale? And you build off of that, because everybody now can benefit from that. Versus if it's just, we need to go hire more of X, then that's an HR role. That's not an organizational role. So that's the first. The second experience is when I was with Russell, and I had my consulting company. I was doing great. I joined Russell when the CEO asked me to come on board, because I was able to build out a profit center in my DE&I department. I had P&L. I had people that worked for me that were on the sales side, manufacturing side. And the very first thing that we did, which is probably my proudest moment of ever doing this work. And again, this is now actually it's 2002, 2001, is that we negotiated with 49 of the 105 HBCUs, but these 49 schools represented 4 conferences, and it represented 72% of the HBC population, to do uniforms, to do t-shirts, all apparel, bookstore, men and women for all these schools, and it didn't cost them anything. So, and again, this is before this journey now and this kind of discovery of HBCUs, but we built a profit center out of the DE&I department because I wanted to show how this works. And let me just share with you this one last piece for context. It was $35 to $40 million annually now, and this was incremental dollars that came in through our doors because we were doing work with all these HBCUs, as well as now our sales team was looking for other opportunities with other different demographics. So we had the Major League Baseball minor league contract for uniforms, and MLB chose another company, New Era, I believe, or some other company like that. We had a plant in Alexander City, Alabama, at the same time that was producing all these uniforms. We were about to close the plant because we had lost Major League Baseball's business. Simultaneous with that, I had signed this deal with these 49 schools. We were able to save the plant from closing by this work with these HBCUs. I had a white male who had been in the plant for 35 years. And imagine if that's all you know, now the plant's gonna close. And this individual was very rebellious against going to any of our DEI education programs or training because he was like, I don't even see what this has to do with me. He found me on a trip in which I went to Alexander City. I was based in Atlanta, I went to visit the plant, and he said, thank you. He said, I now understand what this was. Before I thought you were just forcing me to work with Black people. But this is much broader because now we have this contract. I see what this is. I never understood the business side of this work. So the what's in it for him was his job was saved by us expanding our view and opportunity to go to other markets to bring in business.
That's impressive. Okay. I appreciate that. I gained some valuable knowledge from you sharing that. So
You're a
thank you.
baseball player, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
I remember growing up for me, Russell was one of the brands you always saw.
Yep.
And especially as an early child, because I was born in '99.
Okay.
So
Yep.
once we got to like the 2010s, that's when you started to see the transition to the Nike and
Yep.
other companies. So it all adds historical context to it. So I appreciate
stuff.
that. So now, more personal question for you. What has been your biggest inspiration, or who has been your biggest inspiration, and what do you draw from either that experience or that individual?
I would say the individual for me that has been the most inspirational is Dr. King. One, I was very, very young when Dr. King was assassinated, but I remember being in our car driving and hearing it over the radio that Dr. King was shot and killed. I had no perspective of who Dr. King was. So, but I remember that vividly, hearing about it and then growing up. And the reason why I say Dr. King is because there's another context for you, is that when I was in Atlanta, I actually had an opportunity, and this was actually before moving to Ohio and then coming to Cleveland. So this was within the last 7 years that I worked at the King Center with Dr. Bernice King. And it was around the first movement of the Black Lives Matter. And we were in conference with law enforcement, Black Lives Matter leaders to try to bridge the gap between, and then it was very confrontational because who's the Black Lives Matter group, and they were going to the streets, they were organizing across the country. So I had a chance to do that, but it was also based off of Dr. King's premise around nonviolence. And I had a chance to understand and learn what that was. So then obviously I'm working now with the King family, and I'm looking at all of Dr. King's kind of historical points of views and his speeches. And I'm thinking nonviolence, and this is my naivete, had something to do with violence. It was just, hey, we're gonna talk instead of fight. So what happened out of that was I learned it was a business strategy in Dr. King. So the nonviolence movement was around having a strategy. And if you think about some of the movements back in the day, if you think about the boycotts that happened, it was about economic empowerment for a community, which was a business strategy. So Dr. King is a hero of mine because of that. And then I had the absolute pleasure of working with the family and understanding what Dr. King was about that I'm able to now bring to our community.
Amazing. Awesome. Well, I want to open it up to the audience. We have a question here.
Great stuff. So the Russell.
Introduce yourself.
I know you came in.
I'm
late,
sorry.
so yeah, I'm sorry, Kevin. Joe Jankowski. I've been with Case now, 20 years. Innovation, entrepreneurship, work closely with this team. And I love what you told the Russell story about, like with your colleague going back to P&G, like sometimes bottom line matters to people. They can't all say we're doing this because it's right, because some people don't, share those values, unfortunately. Economic empowerment, right? That's really the real answer of how do you get these communities to be listened to and to receive the rights and opportunities that other ones have, because they currently lack that income. How do you enroll the cats? Because as you said, you're a great platform, right? Which is amazing because you get attention, but you also are relative to the world of, you can't save everybody, right? Are you working with local business? Is entrepreneurship the answer? How do we help to transform these communities?
Joe, you just gave me a softball. We rehearsed that, right? You were gonna come in late and what have you. So let me be really specific.
Yeah.
All right, we had the honor as a city to host the NBA All-Star Game, right? All right, the NBA comes in, it's their event, it's not ours. They come in and they're like, look, here's the blueprint. They do it 2 years ahead of time. They laid all that out. We took a look at that, and there was a part of it that talked about how to do business with women-owned and minority-owned companies, what have you. They had a percent and what have you. We were like, okay, that's good for the rest of the country, but that's not how we roll in Cleveland. So what we did was we took an overlay. We saw what they wanted, and we put DE&I in every single thing that the NBA wanted. And here's 2 very specific things that we did. One of which is that we hosted prior to, actually it was a year before, we hosted a opportunity, it was a summit, a seminar for small businesses, Black-owned businesses, women-owned businesses, but the NBA has specific targets for Black-owned businesses to prepare businesses for what was coming the next year. So it's one thing, the NBA All-Star is in February and November, you're saying, okay, here's some opportunities, but I haven't had a chance to get my business in line for those opportunities. So we did that with the league so that businesses could ramp up. Then what we did was the NBA came in like August or September, and we did a matchmaker with, here are all the companies and organizations that are going to be throwing parties, that are going to be doing events. And we did a matchmaker with businesses that we had brought through this other program. The NBA hadn't done that before. They usually wait till the All-Star game to then host these small businesses and what have you. So that yielded, from a representation standpoint, more business that the NBA has ever done with Black-owned businesses and women-owned businesses. So that's one thing during the All-Star game. The second thing that we did, we partnered with an organization that is called the Real Black Friday, and that's Laurice Purnell. And I'll give him credit because he came to me and said, Kevin, I have this idea. We do this thing called the Real Black Friday. If you think about Black Friday, Friday after Thanksgiving, the real Black Friday is the Black community. So we actually, in Tower City, is a building that our entity actually owns. So what we did, ours meaning the Dan Gilbert's family companies, we turned Tower City into a Black business market during All-Star, where we had over 200 Black businesses, and they actually, the yield was $750,000 of business that they did over 2 days, that Saturday and Sunday of All-Star. So to the point of we can't do all things for all people, we know economic empowerment, economic advancement, economic opportunity is what's going to help the Black community to grow and to prosper, which is going to help all communities. Those were just 2 examples of what we've done, and we do that on the regular. The All-Star Game just gave us a platform globally, but those are things in which we also do on a regular basis.
Laurice Purnell actually is my fraternity brother, and I remember that event being put on. It was phenomenal.
Is that where they have the card with the Black-owned businesses? Is that the same for Black Friday?
I believe so. I think so. Yeah.
I'm sorry you chose the wrong fraternity.
Oh, what fraternity do you remember?
Kappa Alpha Psi.
Wow. Wow. Okay. I'll digress. No, I remember seeing that event being put on, and I just thought it was sensational. Just how great of a turnout it was, and how excited the community was for that event.
And you'll remember Tower City, the days when it was, I mean,
Yeah.
literally
Yeah,
all
I do.
3 levels were just full of people. We had activations in there. And so, yeah, it was a good thing.
All right, we'll open it up for another question.
Hello, Mr. Clayton. I know you talked about your work in the American Cancer Society,
Yes.
How you wanted to make an impact on the social determinants of health.
Yep.
One thing that I do want to ask, especially how you talked about how nonviolence is business. Do you think it's possible that we can achieve community development and social impact by using basketball?
So the answer is yes. I think you can do it by using sports in general. Basketball is, the reason why I'm passionate about the basketball piece is because it's in the Black community, it is a sport that really kind of excels, it's lifted up, and anybody can play basketball, you can play different levels, but going out and shooting hoops is something that people do. So yes, I do think we can get there by using that as a platform. And here's what I mean by that. We have athletes, that are from those communities. 85% of the NBA is Black or someone who came from another country. So it's because of that, and these guys want to give back, and they want to go into the community. So leveraging that as a platform, and I look at the work that I do and that the Cavs do as a Trojan horse. Here's the concept of Trojan horse for some of my younger members of this audience. A Trojan horse was used back in the day where you have this big kind of contraption that looks like a horse. It was kind of awe. People would be like, oh, what is this going into battle? But you open up the back and all the warriors and fighters came out and surprised people. All right. Sports, the Cavs, we're the big kind of shiny toy. People get excited about, oh, look, it's the NBA, it's a pro team. No, I want to bring all of my community partners out the back when I get into that room. Because there's not a room that, honestly, and I'm not being arrogant about it, there's not a room or a call that I can't make and say the NBA or the Cavaliers that I won't get an audience or an opportunity to get in.
Yeah.
Correct. So here's a very specific example. I told you I work for Sponsor Core Mercy Health. All right. 60,000 employees, 11 states, 2,500 touch points of service across the East Coast. I never was able to get a meeting with the governor, secretary of state, senator, state senator, national senator. I could talk to the mayor of the community because we carried a big stick in Cincinnati. I'm with the Cavs. George Floyd gets murdered. Our players wanting to have a conversation with the governor and some other folks. Pick up the phone and call. Just like that. Just like that. So it's selfish for me to think that it's our platform or it's me, and I don't bring our community partners together. So that's how I see, it's not what we can do. We're not the content experts. You deal with prostate cancer, right? I mean, that's part of it. So we just come in the back with us. And when we open up the door, you come out and you do your thing. And that's how I'm leveraging the platform, because it's not about us. We have a responsibility to open the door and bring others with us.
I love that question also in two parts, because I also feel like you were talking about sports is also a place where it brings people together and allows individuals to have those tough conversations. So even just your history of being an athlete, it allows you to have that mouthpiece and be comfortable speaking with people from diverse backgrounds and being able to use athletics to bring people together and start some of those difficult conversations. Love that. Next question.
Did you interface with Bob Herbal at P&G at all?
I know the name. I do remember.
Oh, okay. I was just curious because he's a case grad and we had him in this group too. And I'm going to give you a really hard question.
Okay.
Jordan or LeBron?
So here's my answer to that.
Okay, yeah.
During the eras that they played, they were the greats.
Good answer.
Okay.
I agree.
I think LeBron is the greatest basketball player, talented wise.
Yeah.
I think Michael is one of the greatest basketball winners. Totally different skill sets.
And LeBron's really, he remembers where it came from.
Yep.
He's been really good for the community. He's really wised up over the years. Yeah, so, cool. Thank you.
Well, while we're on the fun question side of things, who has been your favorite Cavalier to interact with over your time, or who's been the most influential, you'd say, in the community?
Current player?
Current or just in your time with the
Right.
Cavs?
So I've been with the Cavs for 4 seasons. Honestly, that person is Campy Russell. And I say that because one, Campy and I work together, and anytime I've asked him to do something in the community, he has raised his hand and said, I will be there. And he's just a stand-up human being.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome, good to know. All right, we have our next question from online. If you would unmute yourself and come on, feel free to ask.
Hello, everyone. My name is Denise, and I am the Director of Human Resources at the Westside Catholic Center. We are a nonprofit on the Near West Side, and we provide services for individuals who are experiencing homelessness. One of my responsibilities is our diversity and inclusion council, so to speak. So we have a number of employees who are on this council. And I need to think of ways that we can continue to engage our staff. One of the things that was brought to my attention on an evaluation was why do we continue to talk about racism? And I think that a lot of people have the misunderstanding that diversity is just about color. It's way bigger than that. But trying to find ways that we can continue to keep our staff engaged in diversity and inclusion. And then my second question is, how can I get information about additional engagements, Mr. Clayton, that you'll have in the future to give us some assistance with that?
Sure, so thank you for the two questions. One, and I know I'm at risk by throwing this out here to the world, but my email is kclayton@cavs.com, and feel free to reach out to me and love to have a conversation. Going back to your first question, and without doing a complete assessment, I can only give you kind of some surface answers of what I think you may be challenged by. The reason why I shared the story when I was a P&G around the what's in it for me is that shifted the energy, it shifted the focus, it shifted the organization when everybody saw what was in it for them. So I don't know if you've answered that question for everybody who's on your council. And it's a simple exercise you can do and just have people write down independently, one, why did they join the council? And then two, what have they gotten out of the council? And that will spark an incredible conversation around the table. Because you'll also be able to do a quick gap analysis around, this is why I joined, this is what I've gotten out of it, and what was been missing out of that. Don't know if you've answered the why question as to why your organization is doing this. The reason why I joined the Cavs, and I remember, let me just say, the reason why I got the job with the Cavs is during my interview, and I will never forget this, they asked me to explain what diversity was. And I explained what diversity was as it related to also being able to drive revenue. The chief revenue officer sat up in his seat, leaned forward and said, Kevin, what are you talking about? I've never heard anyone connect driving revenue with diversity. Because in his mind, diversity was Black, white, male, female, gay, straight, listing all the characteristics, counting chairs and saying, do we have representation? So if the strategy is just around representation, or if diversity is defined by your organization, by your team, by your council, is just representation, that is going to drain people, particularly if they don't have the ability to impact that. The other exercise that I do is I ask people to write down when I start councils or groups, write down their definition of diversity. And what you'll see is most people are writing down characteristics of people. They don't connect it to the mission, they don't connect it to the business, they don't connect it to the community. Diversity is a collective group of people that have different race, gender, blah, blah, blah. Okay, that's representation, that's not diversity. Diversity is the collective mixture of all of us, not just any dimension. So those are the couple quick things that I would offer you, and a couple of tools in which you can use to begin that conversation.
Thank you.
I have a question. I'm curious what you would kind of offer for, especially entrepreneurs that are working solo or in small teams. Like, how can they incorporate DEI in their mission when it's just them, or like maybe 2 people?
Yep, so I offered you a perspective of when I was when I started my company and how it was anything close to anything that I had started my company on, I'd say yes to. And then I would partner with others. So as an entrepreneur, you're an entrepreneur as an owner of your business, but your resources are the network around you to be able, and name my company was Veale, Clayton and Associates. It was just myself and anybody who I could meet was an associate. And with that, it allowed me then to kind of look bigger, if you will, than who I actually was. But it also then allowed me to seek out others that might be able to bring something to my organization, let it be either training or a different perspective, and share the wealth. So entrepreneurs don't do this on their own. And what I did was I looked at my community as my company or the company I belong to, and then tapped into, well, who do I need in the community? And it sometimes, most of the times it worked well. Sometimes it was people that I'm like, I probably shouldn't have partnered with them. But I had to learn that so that I could have other resources so that I could grow and expand. So from a diversity standpoint, I also did look for, okay, I do need 1 of those, 2 of those, 3 of those, 4 of those, because those, I looked at that as assets to my company. And it wasn't just counting who was around the table and I'm done. It was counting who's around the table and what is the added value they brought to what I was trying to achieve. Then I leveraged that. So as an individual, yes, you don't necessarily have a representation from multiple people, but if you partner with, alliance, network with others that have different points of view and different perspectives, hell, I partner with some of my competitors sometimes because they offered a different perspective and they can do something that I couldn't. And the last thing I would just share from an entrepreneurial standpoint, it does not mean this is mine and I have to keep it. It can be, how can others add value to what's mine? That's a growth process as being an entrepreneur.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I think probably one more question.
Anyone here?
I have a question. First, before I even ask the question, I want to say, it's been very impactful to see you here, Mr. Clayton. You've truly been the embodiment of achievement in literally every field. So I want to say thank you for being here. I truly want to say thank you for being here to be a living example of that. I want to ask, how did it impact you in your development when you were growing at an HBCU as opposed to some of the, once you graduated and went into, I guess what we would say is society? How did you use the lessons you learned there to really drive your?
So again, first, thank you. And I'm humbled by you saying that. I'll give 2 quick roads of assimilation. I left a historically Black college, and then I went to a predominantly white college. One of the other things that, and I don't even know how this happened, but my senior year, I'm homecoming king at all white colleges. First, and actually there was an African-American female. We weren't dating or together, but she was the homecoming queen. It was the first time ever that they had either one. So the assimilation process of going from an all-Black school to a all-white school that had all of that, that's why I said they're also the Bengals training camp. So imagine what their gym, what their workout room looked like in their facilities versus a Black school in Durham, North Carolina, that for the first week, I had to sleep in the visiting locker room in the gym because my paperwork hadn't got in from the school. So I took that as a moment of being resourceful, an opportunity for me to grow through challenges. And that is something that I'll tell you has stayed with me. If you ask me what my best quality is as a human being, is that I'm resourceful. But that came from my life's experience, growing up with a single mom, going to an HBCU, and just seeing people make it day to day without anything, because I was that person. So I shouldn't say seeing people, me making it through day to day without anything. So that was one. And then the second experience that really helped me, and I'm not sure why I'm on this academic thing, but let me just, so P&G, we have the first couple weeks, there's this training session. And the training session to bring all the new sales reps together. All right, so here I am with a academic background of North Carolina Central and Wilmington College. I got a BA, I got a degree in psychology and one in business administration. Everybody around me in the room, Ivy League, Big Ten, Stanford. And literally, I mean, I remember that. I'm actually feeling that right now, how I felt like, wow, okay. North Carolina Central doesn't match Stanford. Wilmington doesn't match Harvard. So I then took that as just a personal challenge by being an athlete, being competitive, and I just gotta say, also being from Cleveland, and you know, we roll in Cleveland, right? It's like, bring it on. And I was as successful as anybody that was in my class. But it was taking that intimidation and embracing it and fueling me and not letting it stop me. So that was okay.
It's powerful. Well, thank you for sharing all your perspectives, insights, and just giving motivation to the youth that are coming up behind you. It was a pleasure moderating this conversation. Thank you to everyone for your great questions and all the viewers online. Is there anything that you want to close with before we finish up here?
Sure. One, go Cavs. Go Cavs. And then secondly, I'd just like to close with that as entrepreneurs, you're going to face some of the greatest challenges you ever will face. That is the life of being an entrepreneur. But when you overcome them, and I've hit rock bottom before as well, and in some of my endeavors, it's like, wow, I can't believe that happened. But I lived another day. And it's never as bad as it seems. It's also never as good as it seems. So I've always just kept an even keel. And as an entrepreneur, that next day is success. So thank you all for joining me. Thank you for those online.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much. So just very quickly before we wrap up, thanks to everybody online for joining. Kevin, thank you for being on campus today. It's great to have you at ThinkBox. Trey, continually impressed by the things that you do on our campus, and now adding moderating session today to that list. So thanks for doing that. We have a session next week for those that are interested. Carolyn Jones is a really talented documentary filmmaker, will be with us on Zoom. She's doing an interesting documentary in the field of nursing and the impact that nurses have, which includes a profile. It's called The Catalyst of Joyce Fitzpatrick, who's one of our colleagues at the Case School of Nursing. So Carolyn's going to be talking about the dynamics of getting a documentary film funded, which is really interesting in the world of Netflix and new content. So that'll be on Thursday, March 2nd at noon. And then we've got a number of other things. Check our website for other events coming up. So again, thanks for joining us today, and we'll see y'all soon.
Thank you.